My name is Susan Pavel, Sachtlamitza, Filipina Chud, Tatishal Korean, Wolf Tahoikwash, Ach T Skokobash, Tud Kutabats T Chihapkade, Tud Kutabats T Salik Lami, Tsobie Skokobash. I was sharing that my family name is Sachtlamitza, my English name is Susan Pavel. My mate is Michael Pavel. My two teachers were Bruce Miller from Skokomish and Bill James from Lummi. Both are passed away at this point. I am Filipina, married into Skokomish. So I wasn't raised on the Skokomish reservation or in the Skokomish Tuareg lands, but since 1996, I've been there. My mate, Michael, had brought me back to the reservation, and I was wanting to lay on the couch and do nothing because it was summertime and I was working on a PhD at the time, and that wasn't going to be the case because if you'd ever met Uncle Bruce Miller, Sobie or Subi, he was always working. He was a man who was always working, and you didn't really lay around when he was working. So he was towering over me, looking down at me, and kind of just motioned with his mouth, really, like, come with me this way. So I got up off the couch, went out to the patio. The patio was a real work zone, by the way. And I came out and there was 3 bags of sheep's wool that I had no idea what to do, but that's where we started with the gleaning and the carding, the spinning and the dyeing, and then finally weaving on a 2-bar Salish loom. And that took me all summer to do. 3 months of working 10, 12 hours a day to just make one ceremonial blanket. And looking back at that time frame, I would say that I was someone who wanted to be given over to something. I was what I would call like a B student. I wanted to be an A, and I wasn't an A in anything, but I was a B, and a B's pretty good, but I wasn't an A. I had not given my life over to a calling, to a something that I could be completely taken by, immersed in. In that way, I think I was in the right place at the right time with a good heart and doing good work. And I think Uncle, in hindsight, I'm sure now Uncle saw that and pretty much tapped me, if you will, like you get a tap, like it's you. So that was that summer. Along the way, I can really see how people metaphorically and in actuality held my hand and took me down different journeys of this practice that I've been in for 30 years. Does my Filipina side lift up for the textiles? Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, and I have gone down the road of trying to look at Korean textiles and look at Filipina textiles. And what's interesting is while I have an appreciation for, there's no spiritual draw. There's not a spiritual calling in that way. And I think that that's one of the things Uncle did with us was early in my career, because I was hungry to be. Another way I say that, when I say that I wanted to be an A in my life, the other way that really unfolded was I think my spirit wanted to be taken over by something. Like I wanted to turn my entire physical, spiritual self to something. And because he was a magnanimous human being and also our spiritual leader in that way, my experience of that was that he had metaphorically taken his hand and tapped me, and then ever so slightly pulled out this silver strand from the core of who I was and laid out this silver strand in front of me. It wasn't perfectly straight, by the way. And it was thin in some spots, but it was continuous. And all I had to do was to walk the strand. Just walk it. And I still can't see the end of that strand yet. So I do that. I walk the strand and I do the work. However it needs to be done, I do it. And these days I'm really about lifting up my sisters and brothers who are doing the work as well. And being that, I consider it like a strong link in the chain, being the strongest link I can be in that chain of knowledge that's preceded me and will live on well past my lifetime, that I was this, in this time frame, I was this one link doing the work. So my teachers were 2 people primarily, and one was Bruce Miller, Sobie or Subi from Skokomish, and he was pretty much the person who taught me how to do all of it, meaning the processing, the spinning, the dyeing, and the weaving. The spinning we did on an old janky sewing machine, old rubber hose for the drivetrain. When that broke, we used an old shoelace, but it was motorized. I learned how to spin on an electric spinning wheel. And then years later, I learned how to spin on a spindle wheel from Bill James, the late Bill James from Lummi. And so he taught me how to do that kind of spinning on a spindle wheel. So those are my two primary teachers as humans. The plants and animals were my other teachers. One of the things that Uncle Bruce did was he took us to a patch of Oregon grape, tall Oregon grape, and had us processing the bark from that particular area. And that was when he was still alive, late 90s. And then years later, Tawny Miller, who is Skokomish and lives there, raised there, born there, still lives there, asked if I would teach her how to weave, and I think it was 2017. And so we started that apprenticeship together, and I taught her lots and lots of things. And one of the things we did was we went back to that area where Uncle showed me the Oregon grape plants, and we harvested, and then I shared with her that story that we would harvest there. Then I had Tawny harvesting the Oregon grape from the very same place. And that really felt very complete in that way, because we could pass those teachings on. And that's really what it's about, is passing on the teachings to the next generation, next generation, next generation. I think the stories that I see in my work have definitely changed, and the narrative has changed. I look at those decades of work, and I think the first 20 years, it was really about fulfilling the charge. Uncle left a charge with me, which was to fulfill the teachings, to do the work, and teach people. And I did, and I taught, and I taught, and I taught, and I taught. And then my chapter changed. Like, I was kind of done, if you will. I was like, I'm done. I think I did the work, Uncle. I taught hundreds, if not thousands of people. I say I tried to retire. It didn't work. I'm still here. That was one of maybe 3 times that I tried to retire. The feelings I want people to get from, it's funny when you say art, because it can't quite refer to it as art per se. I always kind of stumble in that moment when I say art, because I wasn't taught that it was an art form. Like, you know, when you go into art school, you might be taught a particular way to do something, and that's the art of it. The way I was taught was that this is a weaving that then will go to somebody. This is purposeful. Now, we make all sorts of things to hang on the wall these days, because we do. But I don't think of that as like, I'm making it because I'm going to hang it on the wall. I'm more inclined to make something because it's going to be used for a purpose. How do I feel about the commodification of Coast Salish weavings? I really appreciate that people are wearing the weavings, because I think for too long we were using Pendleton weavings. For too long we were using things you'd buy at Walmart. I guess I don't like to put shame and blame on things that we were using that were in lieu of, because clearly we were always covering people. Even in the days when we were banned from participating in our own ceremonies, we were still doing the work, and we would do it with pieces of fabric. We would find some way to cover a person. These days, we can, with open arms, participate mostly in our traditional, customary ways. And so it's a beautiful thing to see people wearing the weavings now and using it in the way that it's meant to be. Now, is it sold on the market? Yeah, probably. Is it in galleries? Yeah. And it's being used for the purposes that it was intended. And I think sometimes it has to be in the public eye like that for it to get noticed again. The thing I'm remembering is I wove a fully twined mountain goat wool robe called Dukhacha Tual. And she was unveiled in 2006 at an unveiling ceremony that we had at the Evergreen State College. And we invited 7 tribal leaders from our area to come to the unveiling, and they would then wear this robe, whose name was Dukhacha Tual, which means sacred change for each other, and they would then share their words of wisdom. It was probably the most collective, outwardly public moment that I realized people were moved in the way that I was hoping for, or recognizing that piece of it. Because as a weaver, when we're weaving, we intentionally weave with a good heart and a good mind and a good spirit. And if we are holding something other than that, you just don't weave, you just stop. Don't weave. It's okay. You can go have your feelings of anger or anxiety or angst and then come back to it. when I was engaged with weaving her, which took 14 years, by the way, 12 years of gathering enough wool, and then 2 years to actually weave Dukhaha Tual. The feelings that came from the tribal leaders and the people who shared their words of wisdom were complete. Like I felt like it had come full circle at that moment. The things that I was hoping for, praying for, wanting to happen were happening in that moment. She got to then be purchased, and the person who purchased her then donated her to the Seattle Art Museum, which is where she lives now. And when she was on exhibit, as artists you can put up, descriptions about your art. And I had asked people, when you gaze upon her, to pause. Give yourself the opportunity to just pause. And whatever came up for you in the moment of pause and letting your eyes rest upon her was the right thing that was coming up. And to take that beat, to take that moment, because we often are flitting through our lives awfully fast. And even from 2006, even to now, 20 years later, we're even faster. And I think that her teachings that came from her still reverberate to today. It was a lot of work to weave a fully twined mountain goat wool blanket. And clearly, if it took me 14 years and 12 of it was just in gathering the wool, that's a lot of wool to gather. That's just a lot of wool. And one of the things I think that still resonates today and is meant to resonate forevermore is that it wasn't just me collecting the wool all by myself. There was lots of people who contributed to that. I've gone on hikes with people have donated the wool, people are hunters who have given the wool, or I've traded for the wool. Lots of ways that the wool has come to me. And then as I began to try to process it and spin it, it's not long enough as a fiber for me at that time, though now 20 years later maybe I could do it, to spin. So I had to blend it with sheep's wool. So it's mountain goat wool blend. And then I dyed it and wove it on a 2-bar loom, which is much like the loom behind me. So when I teach people to gather or forage, so I'll distinguish forage and gathering. Foraging is when we go into the mountains or the woods and we find what we find. Things show themselves, plants and animals show themselves as they want to be shown. And gathering would be more like I went into my garden and harvested something from my garden. We use the terms interchangeably, but there's a little distinction there. And so in my young career of foraging for things, I would absolutely ask for permission of the plant that I may harvest the plant and use it for whatever I'm using it for. And generally speaking, the answer is always yes. If it's not, then it's not, and I adhere to that. I just don't gather that thing. It's not its time, it's not my time, whatever that looks like, I just don't do it. But in that way, that's something we're obedient to. And I use the word obedient not from a Western perspective, because I think that word can be misused in all sorts of weird, wrong ways. But I mean obedient like I could hear something. And it's happened to me so many times that I just don't question it anymore. I'm obedient to that. I can hear that weaving, physically hear the weaving speaking. I can physically hear the plant speaking. So I'm obedient to that. Gather it, don't gather it. Bring the weaving alive. Recreate it, don't recreate it. Teach it, don't teach it. Like that. There's been good surprises in my weaving journey. And there's been difficult surprises in my weaving journey. As a woman who is married into Skokomish and not raised within the tribe and being tribally enrolled, it's been an interesting burden to carry these teachings. And when I was a younger woman, it would break me in half because there was vehement people who were either jealous or really wanted to tear me down and wanted me to be silenced. And those were painful moments and painful times. And for whatever reason, the spirit of weaving, Katsiaya, would step back in and lift me back up. I had mentioned earlier that I tried to retire like 3 times. And the backstory of that is because some painful surprise happened. And yet, I'm still here. I'm still doing the work. And I tell you, after menopause, and you can put this in the podcast, I'm at a place where I don't care anymore. I got makeup on, I don't have makeup on, my hair's fixed, it's not fixed. I'm wearing the right clothes, I'm not wearing the right clothes. You want to say bad things about me, you don't want to say bad things about me. boy, menopause is freeing. And, I think that you should lead that in the podcast, quite frankly, because it's a great feeling. And I still honor the teachings of Kotsiaya, and I still honor what it is to do this work. I'm just a very different person, or maybe not such a different person, maybe just really comfortable in my skin after 30 years of doing the same thing, and evolving and growing and maturing, and being lifted back up too by my weaving sisters when I would fall down. The ones who knew my whole trajectory and my whole story, they would say, "Uncle chose you for a reason, and who are you to question his reason?" So I'm still here. I probably have already mentioned it, but maybe it'll change again. I don't know. Maybe it'll change again. And that was, like I said, I think I could retire, but maybe that's not. Chief Janice would tell me this is what retirement looks like. So maybe I am just in a different phase of it. So I think the legacy would be definitely that I was obedient to those teachings and that I did the very best job I could, given all of the human things that will come in the way, all of the things that want to cripple you and tear you down, and that I would just get back up again through the help of my weaving sisters and through the help of community and through the help of relying on others. And I think that's a really important thing to say. Nobody does this in isolation. None of us do. None of us. None of us. We couldn't be weavers if we didn't have loom makers. I don't make my own looms. Somebody else makes that loom, and then I weave upon it. We started the Coast Salish Wool Weaving Center nonprofit in 2018, and so that is, I would say, where my narrative is now, where the things I think about, the energy I put into it. All my attention is on the Coast Salish Wool Weaving Center website and lifting all that up, and particularly lifting up my sisters and brothers who are doing this work. That's where I'm at. That's the narrative I want to be engaged with. How do I support my weaving sisters? How do I support my weaving brothers? How do I do that work and recede a bit to what I call the background, where I've been in the foreground for 20 years? Now I'm trying to recede to the background and do the work behind the scenes. So that's my narrative, is trying to lift up my sisters and brothers. I'm collaborating with various writers at this point. We are working to finish the catalog for the Woven in Wool exhibit at the Burke Museum right now. And then we're working on another, I think maybe this would be called a catalog, where we're pairing a person who is a writer in the field with a weaver from the exhibit to put together a larger catalog. And I was very specific about that because all of our weavers are definitely very accomplished at weaving, and maybe we're not so confident in writing. We're great orally. We could talk all day. We could teach all day. But with regard to writing, I wanted the confidence level to be paired with a person who is a known writer in the field. So we've now systematically worked with people who have established writing skill with a weaver and then producing that. My favorite piece is the people. The people that I was in relationship with, that I'm currently in relationship with, to have built that exhibit together, and not just my weaving sisters, but also the Burke Museum staff and the exhibit staff, because we'd spent so much time building relationship, because museums don't necessarily have the best relationship with Native people. And so we were also, knowing that that was the milieu of what we were surrounded by, like how do we build good relationship given not a good past? And so we did spend some good time doing that. So my favorite piece is the people.